Singapore is an active and vibrant city brimming with people of different races, speaking different languages and practicing different religions while living harmoniously together. Stanford Raffles first founded Singapore in 29 January 1819. Singapore started thriving as a trading port and attracted many of our forefathers from different countries to settle down here. On the 21st of May every year, the United Nations celebrates the World Cultural Day for Dialogue and Development. So how does it relate to Singapore? Well, as you all know, there's this special little language understood and used everywhere by Singaporeans, regardless of their race, language, or religion. It is known as Singlish, but what exactly is Singlish? Let's find out.
Is it the Singaporean version of English?
English with a bit of a Singapore accent. Not really sure, but that's what I think.
I've heard about it, and I think it's a combination of English with a special dialogue.
Ayo, ang mo don't know one lah. You need to ask local ma.
Temasek Design School lecturer Yao Mei Sin used to work in multinational corporations that require her to travel frequently and interact with foreign businessmen. It has influenced the way she communicates to people today. With this vast experience, she shares with us her views on Singlish.
Singlish is really a very hybridized form of communication, the result of many different migrant societies coming together and mashing their colloquialisms together with what they perceive as vernacular, together with English.
Walao, why so chim one?
The language that most Singaporeans understand. Yeah, it's a common language in Singapore which maybe outsiders do not understand.
Singlish is what Singaporeans speak. A representation of like Singapore's culture, like how mixed we are.
Singlish is like whistle, booms.
Mixture of perhaps English, Mandarin, Hokkien, Teochew and Cantonese. That I would say that is a form of Singlish. It's basically a rojak of all the languages.
Some sort that belongs like a language that belongs to us, Singaporeans.
Jalan-jalan, kai-kai, you know, everybody is a universal term like in Singapore. Yeah.
You know right? Today don't eat char kway teow or eat Hokkien mee something like that.
Yeah, like auntie like that. Like that.
Like hello, I also know then like lepak.
Singlish is a common language used and understood perfectly by locals in Singapore. However, let's hear from a fellow Singaporean who grew up overseas about how he feels about Singlish in comparison with the views of a typical Singaporean student. Gary Teo is currently a first-year design student at a local polytechnic. When he returned to Singapore 2 years ago and first enrolled into school, he had a hard time blending in with Singaporeans.
I think Singlish is a really annoying and crude attempt to fuse a whole bunch of languages together in an attempt to sound English. I think it's very, very crude.
Kester Chong is a born and bred Singaporean who is a second-year animation student. Being in Singapore for 19 years of his life, he loves and is used to speaking in Singlish to his family and friends.
To me, Singlish is English, customized with Singapore flavors, all our dialects and our different languages. It really depends on the individual because some people sound polite while they speak in Singlish.
The way they speak is very direct. Like, if, for example, if I was I would say, is this alright or is it not? But a Singaporean person would look at me and say, can or not?
Like that also rude, man.
People who sound polite, they can be like, try this, it's very nice, can?
But from a person who never grew up in Singapore, like an outsider's point of view, it's very harsh and very crude.
With Gary being much against Singlish, we find out from him whether he is picky over the friends he makes in school.
I choose my friends based on how they treat me, but I mean, if they can speak English nicely, then that's a plus, but I mean, it's okay. I don't judge people based on how they speak.
Seems like our foreign Singaporean is having quite a hard time getting in sync with Singlish. However, Singaporeans are not inflexible. We do try to accommodate each other, especially when our content is not being understood.
I have come to accept that in this country, Singlish is the normal form of communication, but it does not necessarily mean that it is comprehensible to people who have never grown up in Singapore.
If we are especially talking to an audience that involves people from other countries, probably it is not quite appropriate to use Singlish.
Unless the person is a foreigner who doesn't understand Singlish and its different dialects and meanings, then I will speak in proper English.
If Singapore wants to succeed as a trading hub, a communications hub, and a media hub, I think we have to straighten up our act in as far as communication is concerned. Many people don't think it's important, but if you cannot put your points across effectively to a global audience, then you can't be effective.
Is Singlish really that hard to understand? Well, maybe not for Singaporeans, but as for foreigners, it seems that they beg to differ.
I don't know, it's kind of difficult because they talk so fast and then sometimes I don't even understand what they're saying.
When I hear Singaporeans talk to another fellow Singaporean, I'm just like, what the hell they're talking about?
It's difficult to understand if you're new around in Singapore.
Yeah, but it's a bit difficult. But if you just really try to listen, then you can.
The foreigners do have a point in comprehending us, but on the other hand, let us find out what locals think and why do they still stick to Singlish.
We are talking to local Singaporeans like the older generations and stuff. I think they respond better to Singlish rather than English.
I'm using Singlish since I'm like young until now. So if I don't use it, right, there's like something is missing in my life.
I think I can express myself more with my friend if I use Singlish.
But like if we don't have Singlish, then it'd be so plain. Like not Singaporeans.
Although Gary embraces English and is much against Singlish, but he feels that for a foreigner like him to get used to Singlish, one must live in that particular culture long enough to be able to truly comprehend it and feel comfortable with it.
Ever since I've come back and I started interacting with people here, I can say that I understand some of the things now, like what they mean and why they're there. So I think you need to have some basic knowledge of the different languages here before you can grasp it properly.
Since foreigners have a hard time understanding Singlish and it is also not a proper form of communication outside Singapore, we question Singaporeans whether they ever feel embarrassed using Singlish.
No, I'm not embarrassed because everyone have their own style of speaking.
Not really, because my parents also speak English. So it's okay, I think.
It's like they're really rude and stuff when using Singlish, but otherwise it's okay.
When we try to speak proper English to some people, then they think we are, up there, yeah.
High class, yeah.
There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a Singapore brand. It's a local brand.
Because other European countries, they have like their own language mixed in with English as well, which is almost like our Singlish.
Singaporeans in general don't seem to be embarrassed by Singlish, and so we gather more insights from them on whether they feel Singlish will actually degenerate our nation.
It depends on expectations from the audience.
Particularly if they are of a certain educational level and all they can do is speak only Singlish.
I suppose if you speak below his expectations, then you're considered, speaking, a lower class, as you mentioned, lower form of the language.
We very proud of English, but how come cannot every time use
You have to know the time and place.
It depends whether on which occasion and who are you hanging out with.
But if like interacting with in so formal places or like in public, it's better to use proper English.
When educating our kids, I think it's better to teach our kids the proper English. But it's kind of like a social tool. When you talk to your friends, you tend to use English. You don't really talk proper English.
Singlish, as said, is a social tool for Singaporeans to understand each other, but as gathered from my experts, it can be used but should only be used at the correct circumstances.
Of course, there are certain times when it would be appropriate to use Singlish, provided that the user recognizes it only applies to those occasions.
if we can understand each other regardless of whether if it's Singlish or English, then why not?
And there are circumstances when you have to switch back to using proper English.
For example, if we are talking about real serious situations at the official meetings, and we start using Singlish loosely, then I'm afraid that we are using it wrongly.
Ordering from a hawker vendor is typical of a situation under which I would succumb to using Singlish.
By using Singlish, it brings people closer together.
Where Singlish is more easily understood, then use it. Communication is, after all, being able to make yourself understood by your audience. I think communication, the beauty of communication, is making allowances for each other and still being understood.
In conclusion, Singlish is not just a special form of English, but it is a culture in Singapore. It is a skill that we can equip ourselves with to be able to break the ice and communicate with each other better. It is part of us as Singaporeans, and as long as we are able to alternate between the use of English to Singlish, according to the specific situations, there should be no major problems for us Singaporeans to show the world our unique cultural legacy.
I wait until see by Shan-lo.
Yeah, go eat already, leh. I damn hungry, yeah. Walao, he boy steady 1 lor every time late.
Or you can ready not I wait until see Bei Sian Lo.
That time I asked the bus uncle how to go. Ang moi kio, he te gong dun wan tell me.